So the left is losing it over what Speaker Mike Johnson just had to say on Wednesday. This is The Brink. And folks, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like me and you like what we do here. All right, so Speaker Johnson, he is a devout Christian. He had to school CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin. Take a listen.
A question about the separation of church and state. How do you think about that, and how do you think about the public perception of that?
Faith, our deep religious heritage and tradition, is a big part of what it means to be an American. When the founders set this system up, they wanted a vibrant expression of faith in the public square because they believed that a general moral consensus and virtue was necessary to maintain this grand experiment in self-governance that we created, a government of, by, and for the people. The separation of church and state is a misnomer. People misunderstand it. Of course, it comes from a phrase that was in a letter that Jefferson wrote. It's not in the Constitution. And what he was explaining is they did not want the government to encroach upon the church. Not that they didn't want principles of faith to have influence on our public life. It was exactly the opposite.
Now, I have spoken about this in earlier episodes, but it's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I'd like to talk about it again for any new subscribers that we might have, and also just to add some more information here. So there is no such thing as a constitutionally mandated separation of church and state. The separation of church and state, it actually comes from an 1802 letter from Thomas Jefferson, known as the Danbury Baptist Letter. Now, the purpose of this letter was to assure religious leaders that the government would not encroach upon their religious liberties. Let me read you a part of it. Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. So, that is a letter. That is not the Constitution. And any attempt to try and argue that the founders wanted some, godless society or a government is a misrepresentation of history. The founders never advocated for theocracy, but conversely, they never omitted their faith from their work. And now, there are people on both sides of the aisle who rely very heavily on a handful of Supreme Court cases that simply cite Jefferson's letter as, irrefutable proof that the founders intended, some level of separation. And while there can be a separation of the state and the church as an institution, there shouldn't be a separation between the state and God. Right? The influence of God. And there's also a long tradition of our founding fathers invoking God in their official roles. George Washington spoke of God during his inaugural speech when he literally said that it would be wrong not to praise God at a time like this. I quote, "It would be peculiarly improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect, that his benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States," Washington said. He later invoked religion again in his farewell address. "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports." Now Thomas Jefferson, he followed suit, saying in his second inaugural address, "I shall need, too, the favor of that being in whose hands we are, who led our forefathers, as Israel of old, from their native land, and planted them in a country flowing with all the necessaries and comforts of life." And God has been integrated into our everyday lives for decades. The Treasury, they began printing "In God We Trust" on coins back in 1865 after the public made petitions, okay? The Supreme Court literally opens with a traditional cry that includes the phrase, "God save the United States in this honorable court." Okay, all Senate sessions open with prayer. Truman designated a national day of prayer in 1952. Our national anthem praises God. I mean, for goodness sake, the very last line of the Declaration of Independence literally says that the nation has a, quote, "firm reliance on God." So now you might be saying, okay, so I guess I was lied to my whole life. Why do they tell us that there is a separation? So aside from the Danbury Baptist Letter, there is a monumental Supreme Court decision. It's called Engel v. Vitale, which says that the state cannot hold prayer in public school, even if the participation was voluntary and the prayer was not affiliated with a particular religion. Now, the Supreme Court ruled that holding official prayer violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, relying on Jefferson's letter as justification to decide the public school breached the wall of separation of church and state, since a school is a publicly funded government entity. But Justice Potter Stewart dissented, and I believe correctly, that the, quote, court has misapplied a great constitutional principle. I cannot see how an official religion is established by letting those who want to say a prayer say it, he wrote. On the contrary, I think that to deny the wish of these school children to join in reciting this prayer is to deny them the opportunity of sharing in the spiritual heritage of our nation. Stewart was right. In the opinion of the High Court in Zorak v. Clausen, the justices wrote, "We are a religious people whose institutions presuppose a supreme being. If we as a nation are no longer one nation under God, we will become a nation gone under." That is the reality. So folks, kudos to Mike Johnson here for being proud of his faith, for leading with his faith. There's nothing to be ashamed about a man who leads with God in his life. Folks, we will be back here tomorrow with more right here on The Brink.